Dear listeners, leadership is about perspectives and choices. An important choice is to lead and inspire by values. How does it look like to lead by practicing one's values? What trade offs does one make in the journey of leadership? Do leaders get lonely? Do they also suffer from imposter syndrome? And if so, how do they deal with it? How do you demonstrate confidence in a world with more questions than answers? I knocked at the doors of another mentor to find answers. Brandon Rowberry and I were colleagues at one point, and I would always admire how Brandon, in his role of a CEO, would inspire greatness in people, building and leading large institutions. His wisdom is timely, and he honors me today by being a guest in this podcast. Stay tuned for more. Good morning, Brandon. Great to have you. Great. It's
Good
honestly
morning,
my
Priyansh.
honor and privilege to have you here. Brandon, you come across as someone who is widely respected and widely admired in the tech space and beyond the tech space in your own leadership journey. You're currently the managing director and CTO of Xenter. You have been part of the UAE and GCC is one of the largest integrated healthcare players as Citium Healthcare as their CEO of digital health. You've been part of multiple illustrious companies like the Mayo Clinic, the United Health Group, and many others. It's been a great journey for you. It continues to be a great journey for you. You continue to make a lot of ripples. You continue to make a lot of impact. I'm sure a lot of listeners today would be tuned in to listen to your version of how you have led teams, how you have led larger teams, and how you've multiplied that impact wherever you go. So, Brandon, thanks for saying yes to me and to this podcast.
Well, great to be with Priyanshu. I always enjoyed, for those of you out there, Priyanshu and I had a chance to work together at Astrodiem Healthcare for a number of years and appreciated his insights and support along the way as we were building from scratch, what is now the largest digital footprint in healthcare in the whole GCC region. And, that was a joy. And I stepped out earlier this last year, but wish them nothing but the best. Try to stay in touch with everybody. And I have a particular affinity for leadership and leadership development and those kinds of things because it's deep in my heart. A lot of people have helped me along the way, and we hope to do the same.
In all honesty, Brandon, you have been as an organization consultant in your early avatars and as well. So what led you onto this journey of leadership? Did you choose to be a leader? Did it happen to you accidentally? How did it start?
Okay, so what you're talking about, Priyanshu, is the first, let's say, decade of my career, I was actually an organization development consultant, right? I was kind of in your shoes, I think, what you're doing now. I did my master's work primarily in organizational behavior. The reason I went into that is really between undergraduate and then going into graduate school, as I was looking into leadership, that was just something I loved. And I knew that hopefully was going to be a good leader in the future. I needed to get trained for that. And what a better way to get trained for it than to study that and move it forward. And looking back, I might have been a little naive in some of that in terms of being the leader doesn't mean you study leadership per se, because then you're sort of the consultant to the leader. And so made that shift. So what happened is I did that graduate work, and it was fantastic work for some fantastic, top tier consulting firms, big Fortune 500 companies in the OD space. Got a chance to, run large talent management processes, get involved in, at the strategic level of what is the strategy of the company, and then boil that down into the organization, not just putting boxes and people in those boxes, right? But actually developing the work processes that were going to fulfill that strategy, and then filling out what people usually think of organization design, or the boxes and who reports to who and how the structures work. That's really one of the last pieces you do, and did that for about a decade and just loved it. I got involved early on in innovation. And what I mean by that is I was supporting 3 different business unit CEOs when I was quite young. And for one of them, the projects actually turned out to be much more around creativity and innovation and those processes. And it just lit my fire as well. I said, wow, this is really interesting work. I'd like to continue on with this. I made a change to a different Fortune 500 company in that I sort of became the OD expert on the innovation side, started working with numbers of professors of innovation and then entrepreneur on that side, and just said, hey, this is what I want to do. Got the opportunity to go lead innovation for another major corporation as a director of innovation at the time, and then you kind of move up the ladder there, and then led innovation for one of the largest healthcare companies on the planet, which was a super blessing for me. I kind of look back now and say, why did they take a chance on me? Because my background was not in healthcare at the time, but it was leading innovation in a consumer technology, consumer electronics area, and then before then. But I think it's your drive and your passion, or at least my drive and my passion to learn those things. And I really made a shift then from the OD and kind of internal management consulting space to driving and leading and building portfolios of opportunities, which lead to companies, which lead to launching and scaling those companies. And then what happens is they're always looking for leaders to then lead these growth companies. And they can bring them in from the outside or pull them from the inside. And I essentially raised my hand and said, I'm not only the process guy that can help you build this, I'd like to be, a leader. And that started out with one of the smaller opportunities. And then it led to a portfolio of a number of company opportunities. And then it was just something that I love to do, and then became a P&L owner. And so went full circle from someone who advises and consults with the CEO to the CEO yourself. So you kind of get what you desire there, but also what you can dig your teeth into. And so then I have this background. So working then full circle after now it's been 3 decades of time with people like you. And, I have a super affinity for our human resources organizations, particularly the strategic parts of that, because that's really where I got my start as well. And now leading companies, driving technology, many dozens later, that's come to that. I find myself now on the flip side of that, having served in those kinds of roles and built those companies now. I still have that affinity for leadership development, because in my journey, that's really what has made the difference that I have seen on the innovation side, on the corporate side. And, it's just better to work in an organization where that aligns with who you are and what you are. And so if I can be leading that type of an organization, either as an advisor or as the CEO, that's where I'd like to be.
I'm sure there have been highs, there have been lows as well. In your journey, Brandon, what have been the greatest lessons you picked up on leadership, and what have been the lessons, how does lessons look like in terms of what's the great, what's not so great, when you deeply reflect on those?
Yeah, sure. So lessons. Some of the lessons are pretty basic stuff, like the lesson that people matter. Right? So you get taught in MBA school or business school or whatever other school that you've got numbers of resources, right? You've got capital, you've got human resources, you've got all these others. But when it really comes down to it, those who are part of the entity and are driving it forward and are unique in their abilities and skills, there is no just commodity human being. They don't come like that. And though as an organization, we have to have roles and have grade levels and all of those things, if we don't have an ability to treat people like they matter and make sure those roles are fulfilling and whole, et cetera, the organizational performance, what I look at as a CEO, suffers as a result. And that's not a soft thing, that's a hard thing, right? I'm not going to make my P&L goals unless I've got those kinds of people. And when you see in organizations that, though that everybody talks that talk, though, right? There's no organization that's going to go out there and say, hey, my people are a commodity, I can just come and go. No one's ever going to say that. But from the way they're designed and from the way they act, yeah, that is kind of what happens with numbers of companies and organizations. And so you see that, and then there's usually a fairly good correlation between their performance and how they do that. Not always. And by the way, for short-term performance, very short-term, oftentimes it's easier to do that, because you can just cut people when you want to, drive people when you want to, hitting that short-term performance. But for sustained performance over time, very, very, very difficult to not have a kind of people matter and a good and deep understanding of that as you drive those things forward. So that's certainly one of my learnings over time. I don't think I ever necessarily thought differently, but I've learned both through good and through bad experience that makes a difference. For example, in the Fortune 500, there's lots of hirings and firings, and I've been part of layoffs in my past where, you wake up and 1 week, 20,000 people get laid off that week, was one of them. So it's nothing that you did, nothing to do with your performance, et cetera. It happens to be the market, or, if those of us who remember the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, there was a lot of fantastically talented people just literally in the wrong place at the wrong time. So those are part of it. Second learning would be that though some people might like so-called best practices of what is going on. Every organization, every company that I've been a part of is unique in what it is. And so there are ways to run your operations that need to reach up to a certain hygiene level. But if you're just simply going to be a copy paste like that, I'm going to be like Apple, right? I'm going to be like XYZ company. I'm going to be like NVIDIA now or whatever. That's not going to work, right? You are not them, and you will not be them. You can take some of the learnings from there and try to implement it for yourself. But if you're not going to you're not going to take the time and effort it takes to really build out those strategies on the market side, on the operational side, on the people side, etc., you're not going to be successful with that. And again, I've learned from both good and bad experiences of that. Another big learning is on the people matter side, but also on the relationships matter side. And much earlier in my career, I was given a lot more responsibility than I probably deserved, to be very fair, right? Even as a very young guy, right out of college, I worked directly with these CEOs and boards and things. I didn't deserve any of that. I think, frankly, what I had to do was I was the one who knew how to use PowerPoint the best. And I could hyperlink things back and forth. And I was literally a generation or a generation and a half younger than anybody else there. And so I think they just needed somebody to come in and help them. But that gave me audience to do some other things. And when I did, you learn that the relationships do matter a great deal. And that if people, even leaders, even the CEO and the chairman and others, if they really think you have their best interests at heart, you're going to have a much better and easier time trying to push those things through. Now, we would debate and argue and have great discussions back and forth. And I wasn't then, or sometimes even now, the decision maker that would make those kinds of decisions. But I've, as one of my failure modes in the past, I'll raise my hand on that. I didn't take that into consideration as much. I thought, okay, it's data-based decision making. I'm going to bring all the data and the data will win. Of course it will win because I have the information. A lot of times that wasn't the case. I would have a rock solid case for my argument, presented the data, etc. But unbeknownst to me, other people, different relationships, different things that they were looking at. It's not always about just the information and what I believed or what I thought was very objective, the right approach forward. Nope, that wasn't the right approach forward because maybe they didn't think that, they didn't necessarily like me, right? Sometimes in corporations, we have little tribes that we get into. And some of those things really matter. And so the involvement of people in the decision-making, the involvement of people in the organization. For example, let me give you an example. In the innovation space, we often run innovation teams, right? And they're coming up with concepts and they're working them through the process. And there's these stage gate mechanisms that you're going along. It's really, really helpful if you have someone who might, a head of whatever in the company, let's say in this case, it's the head of sales or whatever, doesn't really buy into some of these new innovations that you're doing, but he or she is just let them go along. It's really helpful if you have some of their key people, right? Their key lieutenants, as I'll call them, on board, in the process. So they're talking and using the back channels and things that we know happen to influence them in the direction of what is best for the organization and what is best for the people. I didn't understand that at first. And that's something I deeply understand now because it was painful to try and understand that and get what we needed to have happen with that. So that's some of the key learnings as part of my organizational life and my maturity as I've grown into the roles and things that we have.
You are such a relatable person, Brandon. I think you come across as someone who's very authentic, and these lessons are so authentic and so relevant today and so practical. And then one of the things that people often say, and a lot of management consultants say, and then I think even organization psychologists also say that one of the best traits of leadership is to lead by values. But yourself have practiced that all the time. Do you have a quote by which you live by, or by which you lead by?
I have numbers of quotes all over. I don't know if any one of them is necessarily more important than the other ones. I mean, I literally have people matter on my wall, typically. I'm not kidding about that. I also have a quote. It's a really, really old one, and it talks about if you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other. And so what does that mean, right? That means the consequences of what you decide to do will be there either in the short, medium, or long term. That's not going to happen differently. So you're choosing to do this, you're also choosing to do that. And when you think about that a little more deeply, when it comes down to leadership and when it comes down to people, you might not want to pick up that stick, right? Whatever stick it is that you happen to be picking up. I literally have a stick that I had engraved with that on it. And on one side, I think it has choice. On one end side of the stick, it has choice, and the other side it has consequences, and then it has, pick up one end of the stick and pick up the other. Old quotes, but just there's deep wisdom that humanity has developed over many years, has nothing to do with us now, but it has everything to do with us now. The new wisdom, as it were. I don't want to say it doesn't exist, but it really has been honed over years. And we stand on the shoulders of giants that have come before us and owe them everything that we have. And what's interesting to me is we keep having to learn these lessons time and time and time again, even though they're right there, and there's case studies and everything all about it, but something about us having to relearn them so it's ingrained in myself over time. It's certainly been part of my history, probably part of your history as well, and probably those who are listening to this, definitely part of their own, because even though someone can warn me from the past that I don't know about doing X, I still did X. Dang it. And so now I've got to learn from that, and I choose to pull on those sources of wisdom, those kind of quotable quotes, as it were, to help to lead and guide that forward. With the teams that I've had a chance to be a part of and to lead, we often will come up with some of those mantras or quotes or things ourselves. And then, when we were working Brianchu together, you would come into my office, and sometimes you'd see these things literally scrawled on my window, right? So we were on a very high tower, 38th, 39th floor in the middle of Dubai, and there'd be writing on the windows of what we were doing, because that's, I want it to be very visible all the time, what we're doing. I guess another learning for those values is to keep them visible as much as possible, and also make sure that what you've got there is something you're living up to. One of the downsides of having sort of visible values on the wall is when the organization falls down and doesn't live up to those. Not in a little way, but in a big way. And people know it, and it's consistent over time. The problem is then it's like, gosh, I walk in every day and I see that thing, and I know for the last 6 months we have so utterly and completely failed at that then it becomes a cynical part of the organization, and you just can't have that. It creates, from a CEO's perspective, the performance just starts to drop, and you've got to, I would just as soon rip that thing off the wall and not pretend versus have that there. But fortunately, most of the time, we've been fairly decent at living up to that, 90% of the time, and using that as we go forward. So hopefully we can continue that in the places that we get to work and advise.
Firstly, to you, Brandon, what values still resonate with you? Or what values have you held on to since, let's say, you started working, or since you started, let's say, even looking up to your role models? What values defined your style of leadership?
So the people matter value definitely is part of that. Now, part of that was probably drilled into me as a kid. I grew up with parents and in a society and part of a community that really was important. What that meant for me, so on the real decision-making part of that, Priyanshu, what that means for me personally, as a dad, as a husband, as a father, and now I have grandkids, as well as those people matter. And they matter more than anything else, right? And so me being very blessed and fortunate that I get to work in organizations where I get to come home at night and be part of the family and prioritize their time and their leadership development, as it were. That's a huge, huge thing for me. And so one of the values, I don't call it work-life balance, because that's not, sometimes you're, quote, out of balance per se. But if you don't prioritize the calendar appropriately for them, especially during critical parts of their life, then that's on me. And I'm not going to look back when I'm 100. By the way, I'm going to live to 100 years old, or maybe longer. So I'm only halfway there. When I'm going to look back when I'm 100 and others, there's only a few things that I'm going to look back at being a success or not in my life. And some of them are being there really physically as part of those times for my own family and for my own children. And I think that actually makes me a better leader as well, because I'm not wondering while I'm at work or have to pull an all-nighter sometime or work extra hard at this, that I'm shortchanging what I want and what I love to do. When I look on a month, I have this kind of monthly cycle I do with my calendar to go back and literally count it up and say, how much time am I giving where? And are these things resonating with where I want to be long term? And there's, not every month has always gone according to what I wanted it to be. I'd say on the small, as long as 90% there, you're good. But when it starts to dip below that, not so good. So that's really led and guided me, and it frees up my mental space and capacity to do those things because I know I'm aligned with my value system and who I am and the organizations that I give my time to and that I'm aligned to and that I, blood, sweat, and tears to are also part of that ecosystem of me. So that's definitely one of those values, which has all to do with people. What I think that does for me then is it creates a culture, at least in the organizations that I've been benefited enough to lead, is that I extend that to everybody as well. I expect them to be following. Now, not everyone shares the exact same values as me. Perfectly fine. Not a problem at all. But that they're prioritizing what they see first. And so when I talk with my employees first on my weekly check-ins with them and what's going on, I always check in on if they would like to, don't force them, but what's happening in their life and not just at work. And are you what you're doing right now aligned to where you want to be short, medium, and long term? And if not, I can't promise you anything. You're the CEO of your own life. But let's move you in the direction where that can be better for you if that's not what's happening with you right now. And so those relationships then last. And I know that what that saves me, Priyanshu, is an ability to always be sort of micromanaging or checking these little things, or do I trust this person? Are they really giving their full effort to the organization or to me? I don't have to do that all the time because that trust is built over that. And not to say people are perfect and et cetera, but in my history, that has won out almost every time. And so people give you their best because they know you have their best interest at heart, not just because you say so or it's a value on your wall, because you literally take the time and it's literally in the calendar. You know me, when I was working with you, I did not have time to do this. There was not time to do this, but I said, no, there must be time to do this. So I would sacrifice something else to make sure that weekly, bi-weekly, monthly cadence with people was not interrupted and I didn't cancel it, even though there were super pressing issues that should have perhaps taken the time. We sacrificed some of that urgency for the consistency with people. That's worked well for me over time.
Sacrificing the urgency for the consistency. Brandon, this is also something that I always wanted to, ask you, is that you have been leading tech companies for quite some time right now. And there's always a sense of urgency in every tech company, the new product, because you've always be ahead of the market. In the race to be the first to launch, in the race to be, let's say, differentiated in the market, how do you still go ahead and inculcate a culture of deep thinking and thinking with clarity, because that needs a lot of time? So how do you balance that paradox, or how do you been addressing it?
So some of it is strategically, it is not always smart to be the first, right? Part of strategy is what you say no to. So you've got to say no sometimes and you've got to understand what you're good at and where your goals are, and therefore align those things. And where we need to be first, we've got to get after that. But there's some places you say, no, that risk is too much. We're just going to be at parity to that, or we're going to be the second or third mover here while we learn our ways into that. And every organization is different. One of the keys to doing that, though, is to work with people that are at least at par with you, if not much, much better. So one of the things that I can raise my hand and say I did do well over time, I don't do everything well, but one of the things I did do well is I tried to surround myself with people of two varieties. Very different from my own, meaning they have different skill sets than me. They are to a person, for example, from the organization that you and I were just both at. Everybody on my leadership team was better than me at what they did. Right? I could not do what the CTO that I hired did, leading those hundreds of people on the tech side. Couldn't do what the product managers did. I mean, I could do it, but not nearly as well as they were better, flat out better than me at that. And the other people as well. And sometimes leaders get a little nervous about having people that they lead who are better than them at doing some of these kinds of tasks. That's never been an issue for me because frankly, maybe I'm just not that good at any one given thing, but I'm decent at it all across the board. That helps to create a culture where I'm deferential to them in their area of expertise. I know that I don't have a better solution than that CTO, on this particular software development piece. I understand it, I can talk to it, et cetera, but they're the ones who really bring that to the table. And so giving them a voice and making sure that everyone knows it's not, I'm going to be making the final decision, fine, because I'm the CEO, but this is where we're going to go. And they're the ones that are going to build those plans, not myself. I've never been the kind of guy that says, I'm going to I'll do all the thinking, I know, and you guys just execute, right? Just trust me. Just trust me and go forward with. Though I hope they do trust me, that they have their best interests at heart. Please don't trust me on areas I'm not competent in, as you are. That is not the case. So creating that kind of a culture, it's tough short term because you do pay for it in some time in the short term. But in the medium and longer term, absolutely blows the time away because you don't have to go back and people wondering. Or you hire really good people and then you tell them not to think. That doesn't make sense, right? Tell them, oh, Brandon has the answer. You just go execute. We don't have time to get into all the whys of do this. You just go make it happen. And I want you to do it this way. No, that's not me. And if it is, and that works short term for some organizations, fine. I'm not going to be the right kind of leader in that circumstance. But for me, that's what has really, really worked, is that kind of collegial, though very discussion and debate heavy type of organization where we get into it and sort of hopefully best ideas win with everybody pulling their weight behind that. So that has been part of the keys to some of that success. Doesn't always work every time. And sometimes you do have to pull the I'm the leader card and have to make the decision in some short-term nature. But if you do that too much, you're going to lose the trust and you're going to lose good people because good people gravitate to where they can also excel and they can think it through and build the plans and drive. I absolutely firmly believe that. And so that's who I am. And hopefully it's working out okay thus far.
I think what you said, that not every leader in the early days will be comfortable with working with people who are smarter than them, or probably because, of course, you have to be also looking at driving execution. And these things kind of take a lot of, let's say, time in debating out the best ideas as well. That's one aspect of that. And second aspect also is the insecurity that comes in. So for any manager and any leaders, I'm sure that we are all human beings. We all deal with our own insecurities. How do you get over those insecurities? If I'm an aspiring leader or there's an aspiring MBA student, how do you come to terms with these kind of insecurities? How do you face them and how do you overcome?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? The leadership can often be a lonely game, right? Because though you've worked for 3 decades in your career and you're supposed to be this big leader and you're CEO now, et cetera, and you still have imposter syndrome that you're dealing with because you don't know how to do all this. I mean, probably every major role I've had, I've felt that to some degree, including the last one that I worked with you at, where I just stepped out of. I mean, though I had built lots of portfolios of companies over time and helped large organizations launch and stuff, I'd never done the specific thing that that I needed to do, that I was required to do. And some days I'd be like, am I caught up for this? What am I doing? I've never done this before, but yet neither has anybody else, right? That's part of dealing with it. So it is a day at a time. And some days you're going to feel like you're an imposter and man, they're going to find me out, right? My goodness, whatever it is. And then you realize that, what we were driving, what we have been driving much of my career is the innovation side of organizations and the innovation side, even of small entrepreneurial ventures. And no one has done that before. There is no imposter syndrome because there's no one to imposter because there's no one who has actually made that happen before. And so you kind of settle down and go there and you say, okay, we're competent people. I'm a competent person. I'm going to surround myself with the smartest people I have access to and then drive it from there. And the beautiful thing about building it along the way, along with your team, is you're striving and you're failing together. Right? It's not that you didn't build some fantastic plan that's going to be perfect Gantt charty along the way and you just made it. The failures you're going to see together. Everyone's, rowing in the same direction of the boat. And then you meet together often enough. You develop that trust strong enough that, okay, now you can push beyond that and you're making your way, albeit, 2 steps forward, 1 step back sometimes, as you actually do that. And if you create I think the culture and the people help you to move beyond your own insecurities and frankly, their insecurities as well, right? I don't expect people, though I expect all of them to be smarter than me at something, not everything, hopefully, but something, they're going to have the same insecurities that I do, right? Even if they are expertise in one area, that doesn't mean that in these new things that they're tackling, they're going to always know what that is or be there. And I have to give them some kind of grace that they're not going to know either. And they're going to wonder, but as long as they work hard at it and acknowledge that they don't also have all the answers, right? I very much didn't like when anybody would come on and just sort of very arrogantly being like, I got this. I know everything about what we're doing. You're in the innovation space, man. You don't know everything about what's going on. None of us do. I certainly don't, but we're going to drive this and build. Even if you've built a company just like this before, it's still going to be different. So those are, that's some of the lessons that I've taken with it. But I deal with that that's a very real thing for me. This whole imposter syndrome, not being secure sometimes, probably on a weekly basis, because you're just like, wow. And the other thing is we see this so often in our saturated world of social media, right? And LinkedIn and all these things, these just incredible leaders, and they're all over the media, etc. And, you dig behind that and it's usually complete, to be fair, right? They're just really good in front of a camera, and they're really good and highly sculpted and edited, etc. But there's no one, myself included, who are exactly like that and driving that forward. And to be fair, good fortune, being in the right place at the right time, has a lot to do with it as well. I don't want to take hard work away from it. I don't want to take you, blazing your own trail and your own path. But frankly, a lot of those who have done well have just done well because they found themselves in the right industry at the right time, in the right organization, almost through no fault of their own. And they rode the wave well. Good for them. That's fantastic. I've been part of that before as well. But so if we don't kind of give ourselves too much credit for what we've done, then it's hard to kind of have that get too conscientious on just where you are. As long as, and now that's not to be said, you're still putting in the effort, the time, the work, the expertise, the relationships, all of that has to be there. Otherwise you never get to this point. But there does come, when we come to leadership, one more point on this is that it does come to a point where they talk about this loneliness of leadership sometimes. And until I was a little bit older, I didn't quite get that. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're going to be an awesome CEO, right? You're going to be the big leader. Everyone's going to look up to you. But now I get it. It's been that way for some time for me now. And now it's like, okay, well, I've got these great teams, these great people we're leading. Who do you talk to get real good data from, right? I mean, there's not a lot of people in that area who have done that. And sometimes if you don't have an out or folks to talk to in that area, it becomes kind of lonely because the buck stops with you. You are the one where the problems need to stop. And a good leader, the problems should flow up to you and you take responsibility for them, and the credit flows down to the people where the credit flows. And that, when you take a look at that, okay, so I'm taking all the blame, but then the credit goes to other people. That's kind of a lonely scenario, you could think. And I don't think we see that as often as we probably should, right? As opposed to, hey, the leader, myself, you get all the credit for things that went on under your watch, as it were. And then if anything went wrong, you kind of push that down to somebody else, where that's not, it should be the exact reverse. And the exact reverse can get kind of lonely when you're always taking the arrows for what doesn't go well. But I think, again, this is a medium and long-term focused perspective, that when you do that, it creates that trust, it creates relationships, and it creates good people and great organizations over time. And I think we need to see more of that. And fortunately, when you're as blessed as I have been with the fortunate opportunities, who can kind of pick and choose what you want to do with your life now, you get to work yourself into that opportunity. So anyway, I'll leave you with that.
Beyond the values that you live by, what keeps Brandon going when really, really, really bad, when things are really bad, or when things are really down under? What does push Brandon forward?
So what pushes me forward, or what I see as the long-term opportunities that I have and what I strive for, right? So I've got some long-term opportunities. That's the wrong word. But I focus on what that long-term thing is. And for me, that's family. That's me being a dad and a grandfather. That's me impacting, or being a part of impacting, millions, hundreds of millions of people's lives in the right direction, right? For the organization I just stepped out of, the thing that really brought me into and drove me there was, hey, we're making a difference for tens of millions of people. We can give access now digitally to at least 10 million, if not more, people that didn't have access to this before. Wow. That's a neat opportunity. That's something I could tell my kids and my grandkids. I had at least a small hand in doing that for people. And so when you're getting in the middle of these tough discussions, for example, and it's not going so well, right? Or something's failing and not working, you gotta have that touchstone to say, why am I doing this again? Why am I gonna go put in this hard week of work and I'm gonna get blamed for something that didn't go well and that's not gonna feel good? I'll take some arrows for it. Well, if you believe in what you're actually doing, then that's the case. And so you've got to be aligned with that organization. If you're working with an organization, if you're a leader, you're absolutely working with an organization, then you've got to be aligned to what that is. Not every single itty bitty thing that organization does, but the overall alignment has to be there. And that really drives me. And does that work with my value set as well? You know, I've had the good fortune, and I know that's a very blessed statement to say, but I've had the good fortune to turn down far larger compensation packages than others because that organization didn't align with where I thought we should be longer term. Didn't quite there. Not say they were horrible or bad, but it just wasn't making a difference for what I wanted to do in the world. And though the money was much bigger, that's okay. That's okay. And those are some choices I made when I was very young. And sometimes I could look back at that, and my wife and I talk about that, and you know, how much more you might have now as a result of the choices that you've made. But then we look at what's gone on with the people who we love that matter the most, and how fantastic, you know, those things are going, and all the different opportunities that we've then had to make that happen, and the overall bank account, so long as, again, you're in a privileged way, the overall bank account, so long as that works out okay, what matters is really what matters to us. So I know not everyone's the same way, and that could be just me, but that gives you a sense of freedom as a leader to make sure you're doing what you want to do because it is what you want to do, and not just because you get a much larger comp package.
Brandon, so much I think that all of us have, learned today from these invaluable lessons, right from leading with purpose, connecting to the bigger picture of dealing with insecurities, knowing that not everyone will have all the right answers or will have the answers at this point in time, that a lot of it sometimes beyond hard work also has got to do with fate and luck and being in the right place at the right time, dealing with people the right way, and differentiating between what's performance right now to what's sustained performance. And that takes a lot of work in terms of people connected relationships, especially in the age of AI and tech. All of that coming from you means a lot, Brandon. Your parting words to any aspiring manager or any aspiring leader?
Parting words would be just don't give up on your value set that's there. Large organizations, particularly large corporations, will try to wring that out of you because in the short term, it is easier, to be fair. It is easier to not, right? It is easier to work all those extra hours putting that in. I'm not saying, sorry, I shouldn't say, working all those extra hours is not the problem, but you do that chronically and you shortchange your own value set from where you want to go and frankly where the organization wants to go in the medium and longer term. And you'll find yourself someday that organization lets you go, right? That organization is different than what you've built, even if it's your own, right? Even if it's your own company and you're the CEO and you're the founder, et cetera, stay true to that value set, assuming you've developed a good one. And I would encourage you from a very young age to develop that value set where it is from you. There's scads of literature on this. There's great valuable leaders. And don't just take it from the guy on Instagram, right? The social media guy that just says, these are the 5 things you need to be with, because he doesn't live up to it either, or she. They don't, right? That's not it. Go with timeless wisdom of what's really going to matter when you're going to be 100. And live towards that, and you'll be able to look back without those regrets and, you know, be able to tell your kids and grandkids some of the great stuff that you were involved in. And if the only great stuff you were involved in was being able to put food on the table for them, good enough, man. Good enough. You succeeded, but you can have the potential impact of so many other fantastic human beings that'll come after us, that they can stand on your shoulders in the future. I don't know what's better.
That was deeply inspirational, Brandon. My 3 learnings today. 1, leading with timeless wisdom, abandoning the best practices. That essentially was a podcast, and thanks really, Brandon, for resonating with that as well. 2nd is ultimately choices. Every choice that you pick will have a consequence. So when you pick up one end of the stick, you also pick up the other end inadvertently. And 3rd is ultimately what matters is what matters. So at the end of the day, even if you're able to do the bare minimum for yourself or your family and do it with justice, I think you've done right. Thanks so much, Brandon, for inspiring all of us. You personally have inspired me always, and thanks for doing this.
No, appreciate the opportunity, Priyanshu. It's fun to talk to you and to talk this way. I'm one of those kind of guys who as we think and as you speak, it kind of comes out, and then you learn more from the conversation. And as we have these, more of us should have more of these types of conversations, because I think we learn even more than just heads down building slides and Excel spreadsheets. So yeah, cool. Take care.